Right, no more distractions. What is it now? Oh, the Sarajevo Six. They're finally on PC. I don't see any harm in picking them up. Oh no. No, not now! I want to do the wow! Oh no. No, no. Oh, hi. So, cards on the table. I'm not usually this badly prepared when I make videos. I have folders and archives of my personal experience to fall back on. With the Sarajevo Six, which my mind is forcing me to review today, I don't have much information, not on hand anyway, due to, well, I made a whole intro, roll VT. The Sarajevo Six, the forbidden contracts, the ones that were tied up in red tape with Sony, legal shenanigans with Square Enix, and generally odd circumstances all round really. On August 17th, they finally got it ported over, officially, to PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch. Unofficially, Anthony Fuller, a god-tier mod developer, managed to port them over from 2016. Goodness knows how hellish that must have been. 2016 and 3 may be sharing the same engine, but they haven't been the same base thing since that was all overhauled in Hitman 2. Basically, it wasn't just the developer equivalent of move old contracts to the new game. Now, I have a theory that the reason the Sarajevo 6 is in all platforms now is that Anthony's mod, alongside Sony's willingness to get into the PC space recently, what with them releasing Spider-Man Remastered, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and God of War, and wow, lots of Sony games. This all meant that the mod caught both IOI and Sony's attention, and the latter may have asked to let them please finally release the damn thing from their PS4 purgatory holding cell, which Sony said yes to, not without compensation I'd expect. I don't know much of the legal side here, but companies don't tend to do things for free, let's put it that way. Considering IOI rebranded Hitman 3 to be Hitman World of Assassination and implemented most of the levels into one homogeneous thing, it tracks with their current behaviour of putting everything in one place, something which I fully support them doing. And now I'm going to review the Sarajevo 6, or TS6 as I'm calling them from now on. If this format feels familiar, it's because back at the end of 2022, I made a mini-series that had me review all the 2016 elusive targets. This is the same idea, albeit longer and with more editing. Right, time to find those files. There we are, the Sarajevo 6. Let's get started then, shall we? The overarching story / narrative / excuse plot to kill them all is that the Six were a part of a Sigma unit, basically a shoot first, answer questions later and cover it all up mercenary group operating under Cicada, the private military contractor that provides security in the first few levels in the 2016 game. If you played the recent Hitman trilogy, then there's a reasonable chance you've heard or seen the name at least once. The contractor has asked us to kill them because of the atrocities the Sigma unit committed during the notoriously unpleasant Yugoslav wars in the late 80s and 90s. We're drip-fed more information later on, courtesy of Stubbs, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's start easy. Folder number 1. The director, aka Scott M. Sarno, was the leader of the Sigma unit and is currently Cicada's Director of European Operations. He is in Paris supervising security for the Sanguine fashion show at the Palais de Waleska, and the mission runs concurrently with the main mission itself, the showstopper. The best way I can describe the director is that it is fine. It's not a difficult contract, as his routine consists of going from the heavily guarded top floor to the less secure and easier to handle bottom floor of the palace. The idea, as you might have guessed dear viewer, is that you have to kill him as he makes his way downstairs. Hell, there's even a challenge to kill him with a chandelier.
Target eliminated.
It's worth saying that all of the other TS6 targets have challenges like this as well. As for Sarno himself, Well, I like his strong, security-focused demeanour. It's nice seeing more of the underbelly of the fashion show, and I do appreciate that he talks to Viktor Novikov, the secondary target of the main mission in Paris, before he goes on stage, albeit briefly. Actually, Sarno doing this reminds me of Neela Torvik, aka the pharmacist elusive target, who meets up with Darling and Margolis as a major part of her routine.
I have other obligations.
I'm sure that won't be a problem for me, Neela. Do make yourself at home.
Not now.
Great. What did they used to call it? Stereo?
These moments are kind of a nice reminder that, yes, this is happening during the main mission. The issue is that, as routines and contracts go, he's a bit safe. Like, I get it. If I'm going to be making a campaign, I'd probably start slow too, especially given the context of when these released back on the PS4 as exclusive contracts, especially since 2016 was episodic, so their difficulty ramping up is not unjustified, but the issue is that doesn't make him all that replayable. Even Sergei Larin, aka the Forger elusive target, is more prominent, has a mildly longer routine, and actually plays rather similarly to Sarno anyway, as Larin's routine also goes from the heavily guarded top floor to the less secure and more public bottom floor, with the same gimmick of killing them as they make their way up and down the stairs in the Palais di Waleska. It feels like a bit of a carbon copy in many respects. As such, Sarno gets to sit on the C tier. There's nothing inherently wrong with the contract, and as simple as it is, it's not as offensive as many of the later released elusive targets turn out to be. Honestly, it's better than most of 2016's elusive targets by virtue of not doing much wrong. And that's a shame, because it could have been so much better. Garry Lunn is next, 1R, 2 Ns, never forget IOI, and his codename of the Enforcer is much more threatening than his actual gameplay loop. We'll talk about that in a moment. The name comes from him being, you guessed it, the Enforcer for the Sigma unit that the rest of TS6 were a part of. In the mission, Lunn is operating the security at Villa Caruso on the orders of his current employer, the Ether Biotech Corporation, so that the Ether virus, being developed by Silvio Caruso, actually gets made. Wait, that's it? No, that can't be right. Yep, that's all the motivation you're getting. Oh. And if you thought that was disappointing, his gameplay is not any better, I'm gonna be honest. Lunn's routine is confined to the underground biolab. He isn't armed, despite his codename suggesting he would be, and Lunn only has a few interactions with the guards around him. It's a little unfair to call his loop a triangle, but it's pretty close to what is basically a very squashed pentagon. Middle of the biolab, outside the virus containment unit, outside the lab, and inside the security room. Repeat, ad nauseum. His personality is similarly one note, just being very flat and angry all the time. Hilarious in that he's being needlessly abrasive towards the rest of the guards and assumes they're all lazy, but it lacks variety. His voice, provided by Nicholas Bolton, in case anyone was curious, is delivered in the weirdest Scottish accent I have ever heard.
What the shit do you skivers think you're doing? Get back to work, you bunch of bastards. This place should fall apart without me here to keep an eye on it. All the project's done. Don't want any of these wankers skiving after what's started.
Jeez, where did you find this guy?
If you couldn't tell by now, I'm struggling to find words to describe his small mission footprint and lackluster characterization because, well, what you get in game is underwhelming and fairly forgettable really, and despite what the briefing shows you, Lunn is just short, not all that sweet, and has so little variety that it makes it tricky to recommend replaying several times over, either for the sakes of enjoyment or just to do the challenges. Oh yeah, that's a trend, by the way. In the briefings, the routines are super misleading for the player as to where they go. I don't know why IOI did this, as it just led to unmatchable and unfulfilled expectations for the player. I'm fine with somewhat exaggerating their routine for the sake of the cinematic. Hell, I've done it. But in general, you should keep the in-universe video clips to security footage and not where 47 can be seen as if the player is controlling him, which gives off the impression that the player will see this routine in the mission, but obviously it doesn't ever happen. It's baffling to me. As with Sarno, he too has a challenge to kill him that asks you to shoot down a stalactite hanging from one of the rooftops of the cave, which, once you get Lunn's routine down, and I promise you it's not that hard, is very easy to pull off. It may even be one of the easiest challenges in the game. My final placement for Lunn is the E tier. I don't think I need to explain why, I think it seems pretty fair to me. Moving on, swiftly, quickly, and quietly, I think. Our next target is the Extractor, aka Walter Menard. Menard is a high-ranking member of Cicada and has been assigned to Klaus-Hugo Strandberg, the main mission target of a gilded cage, in order to help with his extraction after the military coup has been enacted. If this sounds at all familiar plot-wise, well, that's because it is remarkably similar to that of Vito Durich. We killed him, or will kill him, depending on how you interpret elusive target events in the game's timeline, as Durich was a weapons manufacturer that was arming the soldiers involved in the upcoming coup. We're killing Menard as he's helping to move Strandberg once said coup has started. The two missions, three I guess, are intrinsically linked to one another. Isn't that cool? Shut up, I thought it was cool. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Walter Menard does not have much of a complex routine, and it amounts to him wandering around the abandoned school while being followed by an elite soldier. Yeah, I know, real original, right? Going from room to room to find a place to, relieve himself in, and then back to Zaydan's office where he started. There really isn't much else to this mission. In fact, most of the gameplay is shockingly similar to that of Sarno. Kill the targets without the guards hailing them, noticing as they walk around. It all just feels a little generic at this point, and his characterization, like Sarno, is no nonsense, and like Lunn, is generally pretty dull and flat. Okay, that's a little unfair. He does have a few phone calls that fleshes out his personality some more, notably he actually is looking into the apparent deaths of Sarno and Lunn, and is, understandably, a little grumpy at them going missing, fearing the worst, rather than always being angry all the time like Lunn was. One of his routines is unique in that he talks to General Reza Zaydan, the secondary target of the Gilded Cage, though I wasn't actually able to grab footage of this. His unique challenge to complete is to kill him with the APC turret, which actually requires you to remember the steps of a mission story relevant to the main mission. Not going to say how to do it here, but safe to say it'll break essay when you do. On the plus side, you are rewarded with a pretty overkill target for Menard, and Strandberg, and Zaydan, and the soldiers nearby. As a result, Menard can go in the B tier, mostly because his gameplay is more generic rather than outright bad, not in the same sense as Lunn, and it is miles better than Patrick Morgan, and don't worry, we'll get to him. I do generally like the lore and gameplay of it all, but it's just not as creative as other missions. Room for improvement, for sure. Heading off to Bangkok now, and we come to the Veteran, aka John Stubbs. Weird last name aside, Stubbs is a retired mercenary living off of the money obtained during his and the rest of the Sarajevo Six's operations. Wealthy, and clearly in a better lifestyle many can only dream of having, he is on holiday with his wife, Caroline Stubbs, at the Hitman Hotel. This is where the story finally kicks into gear, instead of being a weird excuse plot that doesn't really get mentioned outside of an easily missable phone call and an Easter egg in a newspaper. Following the deaths of Sarno, Lunn and Menard, Stubbs has become paranoid following their deaths, and is actively trying to secure his legacy, and with that, he's writing a book about the Six's time in the Yugoslav wars with the help of a ghostwriter, with whom he'll meet with. So he's clearly expecting an assassination, and wants to make sure Caroline is well cared for, should he bite the dust. It's quite heartwarming listening to him and his wife just talking things out, and the former trying to protect her. Like, he's still a war criminal and totally has it coming, but it's hard not to cry for the devil in this case. As such, Stubbs is easily the most personable, sympathetic, and honestly is probably the best target in the Sarajevo Six DLC. Hell, he's better to listen to, and play against, and kill when compared to Ken Morgan, the secondary target of Club 27, whose routine by comparison amounts to him constantly complaining about the weather, whether or not his hotel room is ready, and him largely being on the bottom floor unless you intervene, which is not something I've ever been a fan of as Club 27 is concerned. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that John Stubbs is the most enjoyable target to take down in in this DLC. He's not all that annoying to get to, his routine, while still restricted to the bottom floors of the hotel and a little too linear for my liking, he doesn't have a guard following him, only his wife, which is a nice change, and anyone Stubbs meets with has plenty of dialogue together that's well worth listening to. This contract feels like the most like a main mission of the 6, and I think that's pretty high praise, all things considered. It's not going to be overtaking Club 27, or The Source for that matter, as best mission in Bangkok, though considering the rest of the missions based in Bangkok are either frustrating, linear, or just straight up badly designed, or all three, the veterans' flaws are comparatively easier to overlook. Oh yeah, their routine don't go past any cameras. Huh. Sorry, I just realised that. So, as side missions go, this is pretty hard to hate. Heck, even in Club 27, Jordan Cross is a pain to get to, and the security around the hotel makes it all annoying to move about. Not to mention the dreaded security office. Maybe Stubbs' lack of routine is a blessing in disguise. The veteran has two challenges this time. The first is dropping coconuts on him, which is decently easy, but like with Menard in the APC turret challenge, risks collateral kills. The second challenge is to kill Stubbs when on a call, which is also pretty easy to knock out if you don't care for ASA, or in my case, somehow getting away with what I'm showing off here.
The money has been wired to your account.
Central, I have nothing to report from my current location. Over.
My one constant complaint about this level is that Stubbs' routine is random, and while his routine is consistent in the sense that he has a specific set of places that he'll always go to, it's still puppeted by RNG, so his destinations and where he goes are random each run. For example, he may not go to his writer first, but instead chill out for a few minutes with his wife outside the hotel. He does always start in the hotel's atrium, but that's not much help. For this mission, the developers seemingly went to the Hades school of RNG, in that mixing each routine up per run makes it better to play in terms of replayability. I'll be honest, seems oddly applied here. His routine is still fairly long, with a lot of stopping and starting, so I'm baffled by why they thought they needed to add replayability this way, when, in my opinion, it's fine as is. My final verdict is that Stubbs gets to be in the A tier, possibly lower B tier if you want to be really cheeky about it. His routine, while still short, is very enjoyable to learn and, frankly, nice to listen to after Grumpy, Lumpy and Grumpy II. His lack of a longer routine that takes him around the hotel and away from public areas is what's stopping him from being S tier, to be honest. Seriously, this is so close to being almost perfect. Just make him isolated more and away from public eyes. Hell, make him go to the toilet or something where he goes to take a sneaky phone call. It'd be a good use of those deadbeat dead-end toilets. This took 3 bloody days. This is Patrick Morgan, the bastard that delayed this review so I could grab footage of him and his loyal entourage. Like with the rest of TS6, he just so happens to coincide with story events. The justification here is that Patrick was hired by the militia and is working with Sean Rose and not much else. Personality-wise, aside from being basically angry all the time, there's not really all that much characterization. In fact, many of his voice lines that would help to characterize him are super hard to hear because you can't get near him. Why can't you go near him? Well, I'm so glad you asked, dear viewer. Patrick is surrounded by 4 guards, all of which are enforcers, and the moment you get too close to them, they start following you around until you're out of their range. And Patrick, unusual among targets, is armed, willing to use lethal force, and is also actively hunting you. Can you start to see why this mission isn't well liked yet? Look, I get it. From the previous 4 missions, he's going to be paranoid that he's being hunted down. I understand Morgan's motivation here. His friends being offed one by one does make his angry personality more reasonable and understandable, especially compared to Lunn and Menard. Patrick acting as if he has a loose form of instinct manifested out of his paranoia makes him a very nice foil to 47. Patrick being angry, cautious and paranoid versus 47 being calm, collected and professional. However, The core gimmick of this mission is directly based on his story and lore, of which that aspect has overruled the gameplay to a degree that is outright unnecessary and unfair to play against in my opinion. Gameplay and story integration, which is a sliding scale of how a story and gameplay interact and play off of each other, is a tricky beast to get right. And while none of the points on this scale are inherently bad for a game, there's an art in doing it well, so a game doesn't get bogged down in a story, or there's so little story and lore to a game that it becomes an excuse plot. But the balance Hitman usually goes for, the story and lore informing the gameplay in non-intrusive ways, has been thrown out here. His sixth sense for 47, so to speak, means you can't go near him or his militia group, so you, as the player, have to constantly think on your feet and avoid them while setting up a trap, or just looking around the compound. It is a tiring contract to deal with. As you can see here, I'm so focused on tracking their movements, I fail to see a militia member break off from the pack and try and catch me from behind. There's probably a joke in there somewhere. This gameplay loop is such an odd choice.
Strange.
For those who saw my review of The Bookkeeper, and that's not many of you, so you probably should look at that first, you'll understand why I'm so annoyed at how similar this contract is in setup and gameplay to that one. Sure, the guards that follow Purty around are not super enforcers, and they're not following you, but they do not leave Purty's sight, and they're still a nuisance to deal with. You know the phrase herding cats? Yeah, I think that might actually be easier. No, stay there. Stay. Ah! Never work with animals. The juggling of Super Enforcer guards makes this mission very linear and super demotivating to replay. I was really hoping IO Interactive would have rebalanced this for the re-release in Hitman 3, the perfect opportunity to do so, making it so that there were 2 guards and Patrick instead of the worst 5-man bands ever. That would have kept the pressure on without making it impossible to handle. Hell, you could have picked them off one by one. Oh, and if you're thinking of using emetic weaponry on them, well, good luck with that. Unless you set up a very specific trap and have vomit guns to spare, and I must stress this, a patience of a saint, then you are going to be tearing your hair out otherwise because of those fucking guards that follow him even when he's sick. To be fair, that is not entirely unusual for other targets, but it's something to keep in mind and makes it no less frustrating to deal with him. And even when you do poison him and his entourage still actively cheat, as his coding to find you is still active. It all just comes off as a bit of a cheat. This mission does not work with the level it's based in, and the gameplay design is unfriendly and masochistic for the player to interact with. Just for the record, Morgan's routine if you don't go near him is just a massive L. Not in the meme sense, though yes, in the meme sense as well. He turns one corner in his entire routine. I'm not kidding. Talk about leaning on a gimmick so heavily. I want to say something positive about this contract, but I'm sorry, there isn't anything to say here. There's no positive spin I can put on it, aside from getting rid of most of the guards and making his behaviour more varied and not like the Stalker in the Mallory Misfortune escalation. I don't know what else to say. Go to the F tier and think about what you've done, Patrick Morgan. Our final target is Taheiji Koyama, aka The Controller. Formerly the Logistics and Operations Coordinator for Cicada, Koyama retired shortly after the Sigma unit disbanded and became a vocal anti-war philanthropist, using his ill-gotten gains to try and make the world a better place, atoning for the sins of his past apparently. Anyway, Koyama is staying inside the Hokkaido Gamma facility as he's being treated for a rare genetic disorder, Elyon syndrome. Regardless, he's refusing treatment for it, apparently on ethical grounds, and generally is just wasting away at the hospital, something as Diana notes as unusual for patients at the hospital to do. Bit of a side note here, unlike all the other missions, Yuki Yamazaki and Eric Sodas are not mentioned here, giving off the implication that this happens right before the main mission does. I hope 47 bought 2 tickets to Hokkaido. Anywho, the gameplay of this contract is, well, tricky to explain. Spoilers from here on out. His gameplay consists of him waiting for you in the sauna section. He's just standing there. If you clear the place and get into a one-to-one with him, you are treated to a 2-minute long info dump on the Sarajevo Six, their time during Sigma, and generally some other fun stuff that is worth a listen to. Something I will mention though is that Koyama, with the help of a client called Loxley, was the one responsible for the hits, including the one on himself. And if that name sounds familiar, it's the same name that's mentioned as the contractor for both the Patient Zero campaign, which runs concurrently with the main campaign it seems, as well as being the contractor for the bookkeeper elusive target. Hello again. There's even a little note mentioning his other contracts, implying, though not confirming, it's the same person or group of people. Listening to the quite clearly ill Taheiji Captain Exposition Koyama here really brings out the characterization established in Diana's briefing. They're trying to do good while they still can, and wants him and the rest of the Sarajevo Six dead as a form of punishment for escaping any real consequences of their involvement in the Yugoslav wars. Koyama honestly sounds quite relieved that they're able to talk to someone about this. Of the six, he's probably second to John Stubbs on the sympathy scale. There's a certain detachment to his deeds we don't actually get to see him do. With Stubbs, we actually see and hear him interact with Caroline, and comes off as more genuine because of it. Still though, donating money to anti-war charities is pretty up there, so I won't hold that against him. He's a good character. That's where I'm getting at. All done now, right? You killed him. But there's a catch. Loxley and Koyama want to publish TS6's atrocities to the internet, and said atrocities are on file in the director's computer, one of the hardest places to get to on the map. This apparently used to be really tricky, as you had to avoid cameras and any kind of spotting would fail the mission. This isn't the case now, or rather it's been made a little easier. Cameras no longer out to you and insta-fail the mission. Getting spotted by a guard does, however, that hasn't changed. This actually makes it easier to handle, and is quite a nice change if this was intentional, that is, because I sense it wasn't. It seems like a weird change to make. Still though, please keep it. Once you've grabbed the files, Diana will exposit all over you, and 47 and Diana will conclude that this is all going to be forgotten as just one of the many atrocities part of the Yugoslav wars, which is a very handy way of attempting not to set up callbacks to it in later games, but whatever, especially since Stubbs hired a writer to write a book. So, kind of a loose thread there. The controller plays well. I like the twist at the end and the changes they made, unintentional or not. I don't think it's tricky, nor is it easy to complete in this current state. It still requires map knowledge and a keycard hacker, or Smith's all-access keycard, and general knowledge of guard routines in the hospital. As a result, this is a pretty easy A tier to give. And that's it. That's the Sarajevo 6. Honestly, for the price they were sold to me at, £4 or equivalent, it's hard to argue that I didn't get my money's worth, with the exception of the Mercenary, which I'm not going to replay. The rest are either so mediocre and inoffensive that they're not bad because of it, or are perfectly fine and could be replayed if you're bored. I do wish they'd make TS6's routines more complex in general, but as DLCs go, I can't say I didn't have fun with 5 out of 6 of them, because I did. And with that, I have something I need to do. Hello there. You want a treat? How about 3? Yeah? That sounds good. I don't ever want to think about you lot ever again. Open wide.